Hello! New product from our friends at RadioMaster today. It is the RadioMaster TX12 version 2 and this is the ELRS version. So without further ado, let's get out of the box and see what we're dealing with here. This is what's in the box. We have a quick start guide. We have some stickers. RadioMaster also kindly sent me a couple of receivers to play with. I don't think that's standard in the box, unfortunately. Then in here we have the radio and this teeny set of accessories, which includes an antenna. I think this is an antenna cover and a USB-C cable, which you'd use for charging or attaching to your computer for SIMs or data transfer. Now I'll just put the antenna on so we don't have to think about that. So this is a sort of smaller form factor radio. It's kind of interesting. There's been a lot of different styles. Well, I say a lot of different styles of radio. Mainly there's three. There's the sort of larger, I'd say Tyrannus style or TX16 in RadioMaster's case, which is quite big. You've got the joypad style radios. I recently looked at the Zorro, which is very nice. I like that. And then you've got this one, which is kind of like the sort of TX16, but it's shrunk down a bit. I'm very lucky. I can go out and I've got a lot of radios, having sort of reviewed things for a long time, and I can go from like this style to this style over to a Tyrannus and pretty much be fine within like 2-3 minutes. For other people, getting the right radio is a lot of experimentation and what's right for them, what feels good. I've always felt that the small factor radios are actually quite friendly. For some people, they sort of think it feels too plastically, it feels too small in my hands, it feels too light. Those are the guys that want something like a TX16, they want something big. If you've grown up on game consoles, perhaps this is more comfortable for you. Your hands will sit there very easily. We always sort of assume this is a quad radio and you can't do planes with it. You can, of course. There's sliders and lots of switches and stuff. Finding that right radio for you is really important. You need to be comfortable with what you're holding. It needs to feel part of you. And really the only way you're going to find that is pick up a bunch and see how they feel. Hopefully you can go to sort of a meetup or there's a hobby shop where you can actually physically touch these things, because I think it really is important just to touch it and actually play with the sticks and see how they feel. Literally with flying something, at least fly a sim or something like that. Anyway, we're going to talk about the TX12. As I said, this is the ExpressLRS version, which means it's got the internal module there. It is running EdgeTX. It has this little holdy thing that comes up, and at the back we've got a full-size JR style module. One of the things that was a little bit unpopular about the Zorro, mostly the batteries, it had the, I forgot what they're called now, not 18650s, smaller ones, and thus it didn't run for long enough. I mean, you had all bits and pieces you could plug in and do stuff to it, but the smaller batteries equals smaller runtime essentially. This has fixed that. It has a port at the bottom where you can put in twin 18650s and you can, get 3000 mAh there. You can get the larger 21700 cells, or you've got a 2S LiPo up to certain dimensions that basically fit in here. The thing I didn't particularly like about this is this antenna, which just wasn't as good as other antennas when dealing with ExpressLRS. Now they do have an upgrade pack for this now, and there's this little blanking plate you can use to put a better antenna on it. Hopefully I'll get hold of one of those soon and be able to test this. But in this case, we can unscrew an antenna and put a different one on it if we like, so that's all good. So let's go to close up now, because I'm far away and I want to talk you through all these buttons and switches and stuff, and put a couple of batteries in it, turn it on, see what happens. So let's go to close up and check this out in more detail. Okay, I've gone ahead and I've put some batteries in here. I've just got some 18650s that fit in. You'll also notice that is the USB-C for charging, and it can charge your 18650s. There's also an SD card there which is included. There is a lot of space in here to put those extra batteries in, or your 2S pack, to the point that if you don't have that in right, that can sort of jump about a bit and you might need to put a little bit of foam in just so it doesn't rattle. Anyway, that means it switches on now. Welcome to EdgeTX. Running EdgeTX as said there. And you've got a whole bunch of buttons and stuff. There's one thing I would like with these radios. I'd like them to colour in the words in like white or something. Sometimes if I can't remember what's what, because I have a lot of radios, I have a hard time saying these because, I'm an old man and stuff. Anyway, you've got buttons for like going to system. You've got the back button, or the return button there. You've got the page button where you just go through the menus back or forth. You've got a dedicated telemetry button, and you've got this wheel which can push down, and you've also got this thing specifically for model memory. And I've got the beeps turned on right now. I'll have to get rid of those. People will complain. Up the top here, this is laid out a little bit differently. Here you've got your sort of traditional trainer port. Also can be probably used for doing sims, but no one really does it anymore. They will use this one. That is specifically the data USB port. If you want to do sims, connect to computer, you have to use that one. The charger one is the one underneath. Shame they couldn't all done it in one, but that's the way it goes. What you've then got here, I say it's a little bit not traditional, because traditionally these back buttons here would be 2-position switches. On these ones, they are both 3-position switches, and I normally have this as my arm, and you still can. You can do a 2-stage arm if you want to, or whatever you want there. They're just 3-position switches instead of 2-position switches. These ones, also 3-position switches. This is normally my mode one, and this is my air mode and other stuff. This is usually my turtle mode, and on planes there'll be something else. The interesting bit here is the A and D buttons. I suppose you could call them momentary switches if you wanted to, but they are just single press buttons. I'm not used to seeing buttons like this on these sort of radios, but there you go. And as mentioned before, these are the S1 and S2 sliders. They're really nice actually, and they've got a little detent in the middle which isn't too strong, but you can easily feel where your middle is. So if you've got a pan and tilt, mostly on planes, I used to fly with these sort of things on planes all the time, and get quite good at just because you're just cruising around. It's very easy just to do your panning and tilting on those sorts of things. You've got 4 trim switches, which again, if you're not flying a manual plane, you don't have to think about. And these ones, these little screws here, apparently change how far the stick movement can go. I had a bit of a play with it. I have to say I couldn't do much with them, but I'm fairly happy with how they are anyway. It'd be good if they do a little bit more detail on exactly what happens, what each one is for. Do you have to tighten it, loosen it, and what it does? Because I'm not sure. And as mentioned on the back there, if you want to put like crossfire or something else in, you have got yourself a full size JR module there. These are Hall effect gimbals. Feel pretty good. We'll have to see how they look in the sim, or when we connect to Betaflight or something. And this is, as I said, running OpenTX. So if we go into System and we go to the ExpressLRS thing, we've got some gubbins here. What have we got? Our TX power is up to 250 milliwatts, and it's come out of the box running what? 230. Obviously you can use the bind button on things, but what I want to do is update this firmware with my own bind phrase. As far as the sort of radio features goes, it feels very similar to the Zorro. It actually takes the Zorro firmware, I believe. It feels pretty good in my hands, but as I said, a lot of people don't like the smaller size. I generally do. But let's go ahead and update the firmware, and then we can actually get to the flying of it and see how it feels. My absolute normal thing here, what I do is I go into the ExpressLRS settings, I turn a Wi-Fi on, I connect to it on my computer, and it pops up this handy little window and tells me what it's running at the moment, and it tells me it's running the RadioMaster Zorro 2400 TX firmware. It's on 230 as we said, so it's very easy to go ahead into the ExpressLRS configurator, pick RadioMaster 2.4, pick the Zorro TX, and to be fair, there's not many options as it comes to. There's the TX16S, or there's the Zorro S. Well, on the Zorro S, I'm going to use Wi-Fi. EdgeTX pass-through exists if you want to use that instead. I find Wi-Fi pretty easy, and I've just got my normal binding phrase, and I'm going to go ahead and say manual address because it works better than me, and I'm going to build and flash that. If you're wondering why I haven't gone up to version 3 yet, it's because I've just been flying stuff too much to look at the new release candidate firmware for version 3, and I've got a lot of receivers in there, so I thought, you know, when I get to it I'll do it all at once. But at the moment I've got various radios in various states of 2 point something, and we're just going to go ahead with that for now. Okay, we're done, so let's see if we can turn on a quad and connect to it, and then we can see how good those gimbals are if we look at them on something like Betaflight. So my quick and dirty test here of how accurate the gimbals are is to look for that 1500 rating as I move back and forth and see if they come exactly back down to that. And they do. It's really, really accurate. That seems absolutely spot on. There are a couple of, you know, I need to go through and do the sub trims because the high and low limits aren't quite right, but the fact that they just drop perfectly back to 1500 every time is really, really good. It's just spot on every time. As far as sims go, you shouldn't have any problem. I've just connected it with a USB-C cable to the top there. In my radio settings, you'll see it's all good, and we can go ahead and start flying this. My goodness, what a great looking sim. I wonder where I can get this from. But if you're thinking cables are too much for you, then you just need to go into the ExpressLRS menu and then activate BLE joystick. And as long as you've connected that Bluetooth to your computer before and it still knows about it, then you should find it works absolutely fine for your sims. It comes up as unknown as my sim because it doesn't know what the joystick is. But it works perfectly well, it's wireless. I really can't pick up any sense that there's any delay in it. And, you know, to be fair, that's what most controllers are now. If you look at Xbox and PlayStation, they're all Bluetooth, so there's no reason why this shouldn't be any good either. So yeah, works great as a sim radio. But what we need to do is fly something, see what the range is like, and see how it feels. Well, about 2 weeks have gone by because it's been absolutely awful weather. This is the weather I've been waiting for. I'm filming with a GoPro, 10-bit colour, needs about 4 bits to fit in all those shades of grey, but there you go. Here with the TX12 Mk2, finally ready to fly it. As per normal, I'll be using the Aquila so I can go out to about a kilometre, see how the radio signal looks. And I guess I'll be having the antenna like this because that's the direction that the antenna's like on the quad. But I have bought a mini Moxon with me, although I have to use a RPA2SMA adapter to use it, so hopefully I'll get to try that out as well and see what the difference it makes. I'll be setting this to 100 milliwatts of power, and I think we used about 150 hertz, something like that, to actually control it, because it doesn't need anything super quick, and we'll see how that looks. And we're up and running, and the one thing to just apologise for is this footage looks a bit crap, and that's because the power play didn't record. So this is from the Fat Sharks, which always look a bit worse than it actually was. It was pretty grey and nasty out there, but it wasn't quite this bad. Anyway, we are concentrating of course on how good the signal is from the radio and how it feels absolutely fine, not a problem there. Quite chilly though in the hands, that's the only thing I noticed. And I'm keeping a good eye on my LQ and my RSI signal there. This is just a very basic whip antenna essentially, and often the case in these ones I get the sort of LQ blipping about just occasionally, and the RSSI obviously being a little bit worse than something like a mini Moxon antenna, but this isn't creating a problem. As I remember it, this seems to be nicer than the Zorro did first time out. But what we're going to do, we're going to get up to about the kilometre mark, not too far past, and do the turn. The turn is where we expect much worse things to happen because we basically exposed the null of the antenna, and so we would expect that LQ to drop and the RSSI to go up, or sort of further down if you like, sort of minus 100. Anyway, we're here, just gone past the kilometre mark. You can see it's kind of wobbling a bit. There's quite a strong wind going this direction. Here's the turn, and we drop down to 60 on the LQ, but the RSSI stays fairly stable, fairly happy with that. And you can see that now we're going with the wind. Our speed certainly increased. It's a little bit more smoother, and the LQ looks good, and the RSI dBm value looks good as well. So let's bring this quad back down and land it so we can do another test. Yeah, there was nothing wrong with that flight. It did pretty well. A little drop in the turn as you'd expect, but I thought we'd put the Mini Moxon on, we'd give it a go. Now, as I said, this radio uses RPSMA. Most of my antennas are SMA, so I've had to use an adapter, which isn't great because it sort of cuts down a bit of the signal essentially. But we'll try it with this, see how it goes. We're fighting the wind going out there, so the battery's not lasting very long. But I'll put a slightly bigger battery on, see if we can do anything with it and see how it feels basically. Still on 100 milliwatts, still the same settings as before, just to see how this goes. And off we go again. You'll notice the DVR quality has improved significantly. This because the power play was working fine for this one. Don't know what happened on the first one. I basically had the landing, the takeoff, and then the bit in the middle was completely dark. Very odd indeed. Anyway, as mentioned, this has got the Mini Moxon antenna, and what I did, I just noted down the values of the LQ at its worst and what the dBm value was flying out in this direction when we got to about a kilometre, and what the worst of it was. Now, I'm not trying to do like exactly the same route, so my height might be different, speed's different, you know, this is an approximate. We're just seeing if this improves it in some sort of noticeable way. And I didn't feel there was anything wrong with the regular antenna. And for a lot of instances, when you're just flying around within like a kilometre of yourself, you're going to have an absolutely fantastic signal, whether you're, you know, behind trees or in a bando or whatever. That shouldn't be a problem. But always interesting to see what a better antenna will do. Now, I noted down that as we just before the turn, our dBm RSSI got to -91 was its worst, and we're here at about -84, -85, so there is an improvement from that point of view. And in fact, what I decided to do is go a little bit further, go up to like 1.5 kilometers, because there wasn't anything over that road. I thought I'd go out onto the lovely mud. If it falls down in this mud, you're not getting it back. This mud is like quicksand essentially. Everything will just sink into it. But we're still doing pretty well. We're still, if you still look at the dBm value here, we're at -88. So let's do the turn and see what we get when we hit the null. And we drop a couple of points on the LQ. The dBm value goes to a min of -99. Previously at the turn at about 1.2 with the regular antenna, we are at -101. So certainly an improvement there. And if you're looking to get full range out of this system, then something like a directional antenna is good. But don't forget, that does limit how you can fly around, behind yourself, to the side, things like that. So bear that in mind. On the way back, I was thinking, oh, I should check, you know, if I can do reasonably low at some sort of distance away from me, and I didn't have much space to do it. We're only at 300 meters here. We're not particularly low, but this is the sort of thing I like doing, so, you know, sort of flying low and cruising around close to stuff. I find that pretty cool, and we've got a very strong signal here, absolutely not a problem. So let's land this guy, because as I said, it's windy and my hands are getting really, really cold out there. Yeah, all good. No problems on either of those flights, apart from the fact it's pretty cold actually. My fingers are starting to get a little bit numb, and also the cows are starting to investigate what's going on here. But yeah, good radio. Let's go back to the office for some final thoughts. Okay, there you go. We went out and we flew the TX12. It felt really good. It felt very familiar as well, because it's very much like a Zorro in a kind of different arrangement, but with some of the problems fixed. As said, you can use 18650s, you can use the, I think they're 21700s, the bigger Li-ion batteries, or you can use reasonably big 2S batteries as well, because you've got a big section in there. So battery life will last a long time, much longer than my days standing out in a cold field. Also, this antenna, whilst fine and still better than the RadioMaster can be swapped out for something directional and more powerful. That's very good. Gimbals wise, I have to admit that when we're talking about like Hall effect gimbals versus other things, I can't feel the difference because it's very much, it's sprung, but I can see the difference. I can see when I let go and it returns instantly to that 1500 G6, and as the radio heats up nothing changes. That's really nice. That's super accurate. So your thumbs or your pinch is always going to be consistent when you move it the same amount, and it comes back to normal. So that's very nice. Although feel for me is pretty much the same as something non-Hall effect. And of course you've got a full-size module bay here if you want to put in Crossfire or multi-protocol module or anything else. Very easy to do so. RadioMaster seems to be a nice high quality radio. I really can't fault them, and I like this design. Each button has its own function. This metal spinner and button is very nice. If I was nitpicking, and I'm going to, the only thing I would like, because I tend to switch around radios a lot, is each of these buttons has its function sort of embossed in there, so it's sort of cut in. But if they could just make that a different colour, then I could see it easy. Sometimes I want to look and I'm like, oh dear, we're an old man over the top of the glasses just to see what it is. And if that was like in white or something, I could just glance at it and it'd be really nice. Most importantly, for you guys thinking of buying a radio out there, is what feels comfortable. Is it something like the game style controller like the Zorro? Is it something like the TX12, which is a sort of more mini style radio that fits nice in your hands? Or do you like the great big lots more switches radio like the TX16S, of which I haven't got one here? I think that's most important because the radio kind of becomes an extension of you. It's like you don't think you're holding a radio. It's like your thoughts just transfer to your thumbs somehow when it's right. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to think about, oh, where's that switch? Your fingers are just there and they know what's doing. So if you can go and like hold a bunch of radios and decide what's comfortable or more comfortable to you, then that's really useful. For me, sadly I don't get to fly every day because I live in England and the weather's horrible, but I do get to play video games every day because that's what I've done since I've been like 11. So always, whenever I hold a controller like the Zorro that feels like a game controller, it feels much more at home to me than another radio. I get on fine with the other radios. This seems to be my personal preference for what is more comfortable to me. But you'll need to find it out, and you'll need to get that first before you look at the features. Anyway, I'm going on and on. This has been the RadioMaster TX12 Mk2, which was kindly supplied by RadioMaster. Many thanks to them, and you can find links down below for where you can check this out. I hope that review's been helpful, and I hope you get on well with whatever radio you decide to go for your first radio or your next radio or whatever. Anyway, hope that's been helpful. I will catch you next one. Bye for now. Well, you've made it to the end of the video, so thanks once again for watching. If you like what you saw, then please consider subscribing, and if you really like what you saw, then be sure to check out the link to my blog for a variety of ways in which you can help support this channel.